All right, so welcome to today's session. I'm your host, Shankar Ramani. Most of you, nearly all of you, have attended sessions before, according to the poll. So happy to be back again to do another session. As we are aware, this whole series of sessions is meant to address the challenges and problems that we face in our lives, but from the point of view of being a person who pursues spirituality and is doing meditation. So all of the solutions and topics and recommendations provided here are entirely from the lens of a spiritual person, and that's somewhat unique. In many cases, as we have discovered already, conventional wisdom would state otherwise in terms of how to deal with the problem, but we have a different approach on it. And that's because we are always bothered about our spiritual progress in our lives, which frankly should be at the center of our lifetimes and our lifestyle. All right, with that said, this is the second part of the session that we had last week. I did actually record the session and the video is also out. So if you do need to refer back, you can always go back and watch these sessions. Today, we are going to continue with the second part of this, some more perspectives, in fact, a few more than what we saw last week. But as always, we will start with meditation first. That's most important. The fundamental framework for a spiritual person for solving problems is that we need to achieve that higher state of consciousness, which is in essence meditation. And we need to be there as long as we can, and as many times as we can, as often as we can. That is really the most fundamental, basic building block of beginning to solve or be free of problems in our lives. So this session, in addition to providing some perspectives, definitely works on or helps us all work on how can we achieve that state. Now, to begin with, the most important benefit is collective meditation often is a whole lot more powerful than your individual meditation at home. So we go through this meditation, and each week we try to work on our state. So that if it continuously improves and we are in that higher state, we will sort of automatically see our problems disappearing. So with that said, let's get into a meditation first. Let me just quickly check if there's anyone new. I don't see that anybody is completely new. All right, so the meditation essentially will be for people who are familiar with Sahaj. In case any of you do need in a future session, a different approach for which is more basic, you can always write back to me. With that said, let's start our meditation and let's collectively raise our Kundalini energy. I'm sure all of you are already familiar with the technique, or at the end of the session, I can also point you to the video that explains that. So we will now close our eyes, go into silence, and begin to raise our Kundalini energy collectively. Now, we start today's meditation with the surrender that's required to be in that state. So when we say we surrender our spiritual selves to this great, all-pervading power and divine energy in this universe, acknowledging that we are not the doers, and this whole intelligent power is the one that does everything and moves everything. And when we surrender in this way, it begins to take care of all our problems. But more importantly, it helps us get past our ego and enter into that state of meditation. So let's take a few seconds, develop this feeling of surrender, leave all our conditionings, rigid thoughts, inflexibility, ego behind, and take this moment to surrender to this great power of this universe. As a next step, let's try and forgive and accept all our shortcomings and all other shortcomings and all the problems that we have been facing. Let's just forgive and move past them. They do not matter, and all they are doing is holding us back from our spiritual progress. So let's take a moment now to just forgive and let go and just accept everything and everyone as they are. Now let's take our right hand, place it across our forehead, and let's work on this center, the Agya Chakra, the biggest obstacle to our spiritual progress. Let's activate the power in this chakra. Let's let go, let's forgive, and let's strongly desire the higher state of consciousness and meditation. Now let's say the affirmation, I forgive everyone, including myself. Now let's take our attention to the Nabhi chakra, which is in the center of our stomach. Let's thank this great divine power for having given us self realization and for having answered the call of our seeking. And that is the reason that we are on the spiritual path today. Let's ask this great power to give us contentment and satisfaction and generosity. Let's ask for the power to be great hosts and accommodate people in our lives, to care for them, to nurture them, to have the concern for humanity. And now let's take our attention to the crown of the head or the Sahasrara chakra. Try and relax, surrender, rise above the thoughts, which means that if we are seeing any thoughts or getting any thoughts, we just detach, ignore, and keep our focus on our Sahasrara. Let's treat the thoughts as insignificant and not important. So we can say, not this, anytime we get a thought. Let's continue in that state of silence for some time. Now we can gently open our eyes and thank this great divine power for having given us the opportunity for self-realization. Now we will continue with our session. So last week we had seen about the core principles around managing money and the concept as such for a spiritual person. So we did see that the whole concept of how much wealth we have, how much sort of comes our way, and how contented we feel, and all of the problems related to money and finances centers around two things. One is the Navi Chakra itself, and then the whole development of that power or spiritual principle or the power of wealth within us. So we need to work on both of these, and today we will see some more information about that. We did speak about the overall improvement of the meditative state, which is essential for solving all problems. Um, and then the goal to sort of get to that state where problems either do not arise or they automatically get solved, or in short, you could say you will not even feel that there is a problem, even though by common definition, it might be that you might be having a problem related to finances and money. So that's the state that we want to reach. And said we did say that being surrendered and leading a balanced life is the best way to avoid problems. And we covered many aspects relating to money. So we're going to just continue on there. I gave a number of recommendations based on the teachings in Sahaj, anecdotal experiences of practitioners, and so on. And you could say they are even best practices, teachings, experiences from different people. So we're just going to continue down that list today in part two. And the first one there is about saving money, something that we did not cover last time. Actually, saving money, putting away surplus money is a great idea. Although it might seem on the face of it that, if you're spiritual people and we are focused on, meditation and stuff like that, then you probably are not, and maybe even should not, be worrying about saving money and counting it and keeping it. But that's conventional wisdom. In reality, as long as saving money doesn't become an obsession, and we have the right balance in our lives, it can be a good thing. Because last time in last week's session, I did mention that when you have surplus money, putting it to good use for good causes like the benevolence of the world is actually a great idea, and it will help us grow as well. So from that angle, it's good to save money, as much money as we can. And we save money, real wealth, only by obviously spending less than what we make. But then in general, saving money is a good idea, as long as it does not put any pressure on our attention. And as long as we ensure that the savings are spent with wisdom. That's about saving. I wanted to go more specific into investments. Should we even invest? And again, the same rule applies. It's not a bad idea at all, as long as we are careful about the method and the avenue for investment. Generally, we should avoid investments, example being the stock market. And that's only a general rule. This is no means to say that stock market is good or bad. It's up to an individual preference. But from a spiritual angle, something that goes up and down, if it puts pressure on our attention, and if it is taking our attention away and getting in the way, and it's maybe even causing stress, then it's a good idea to avoid those kind of investments. And then investment vehicles where money compounds or grows while we sleep. That's kind of the best we can get for, right? Like we might be meditating and we might be attending these sessions, collective meetings and all that, but our money is still invested somewhere and it grows. And there are those kind of investment vehicles. And that's why I've mentioned three of them, which are okay from a perspective of should a person who's pursuing a spiritual life invest in them. Real estate is absolutely fine. It's something natural. So the common thread in the recommended investments is it's completely natural. We know that real estate is actual space, Mother Earth, and so on and so forth. We know gold is timeless from time immemorial. From ancient times, gold is always gold, right? Art also we know has a very strong resonance with Sahaj. So something that is beautiful has been created, the work of an artist. In fact, the guidance and recommendation from Sahaj is that we should encourage art. We should make sure art is thriving and surviving. And one way to do that is the right kind of art. If we invest and it grows in value, although it's extremely difficult for somebody to invest in art, if you were to get started, you would have to have a lot of knowledge and nuance and all that. But just as a general mechanism, to answer the question, if saving money is good and subsequently putting it to good use is a good thing, then how do we save money and how do we even grow money, right? Some of these are recommended, you could say. But again, all of this comes down to individual preferences and what you really want to do. These are just acceptable avenues for putting your surplus money. And the good thing also is to use those investment vehicles where, as I said, money is compounding without much attention or work that we have to do. And if you notice, many of these investments are something of that kind. They have an intrinsic value that is real, and they don't keep moving up and down, and they don't give you the fear of losing your money. For the most part, I mean, if there is something very serious or drastic going on, then sometimes it happens. But in general, for the most part, that's a good idea. The next recommendation is never try to make money out of Sahaj. And the only way somebody could do this is by, trying to make a profit of the knowledge of Sahaj, trying to charge for a class, or we have had very few instances, somebody who says, okay, I have learned Sahaj, now I'm going to use all of this material and all of these techniques, and I want to start my own class and I want to start charging money. That would be an example. Very few people rarely ever do it, but all the same, it's important to mention that Sahaj in itself should never be used as a means to make a profit or money. That's a strong recommendation, and that's because that is in direct conflict with the way we are, you could say, pursuing Sahaj is for it to improve our state and for it to actually give us the benefits, spiritual benefits. It is not meant for us to gain from a material perspective. So that's a strong recommendation. Moving on, the whole concept of enjoyment. Last week, I did mention that having enjoyment is not a bad thing. We don't want to be those serious, yogis sitting in a cave, far away from humanity and trying to live reclusive lives. And we don't need to sacrifice. We can live in this world. Anything that charges up our attention in a positive sense is completely fine. At the same time, when it comes to money, we don't actually have to spend money for enjoyment. A classical example would be expensive vacations, are not necessary. Now, if you still want to, if you have the money and you feel that doesn't hurt you and it helps you, then by all means go ahead. That's an individual decision. But the point here is that there is a lot of enjoyment when you are actually pursuing spirituality, for you to get a lot of enjoyment without actually even spending money. And that is, you could get the whole experience of going deep within, and the experience of, say, a large collective gathering. It gives you a great amount of, you could say, recharging, the much needed vacation, a whole lot better than the most expensive vacation can provide. That is the point. So after we have begun our spiritual journey and after we are meditating regularly, we could probably rethink and revisit what constitutes enjoyment, because the traditional enjoyment is, okay, take a break, go on a vacation, spend on a cruise and all that. That's the conventional wisdom out there. Or do anything, and the more money you spend, the greater the enjoyment. That is sort of the conventional wisdom out there. But that whole paradigm is broken in a big way when we start practicing something like Sahaj. There probably isn't a need to spend so much money. You could just be relaxing and getting 4 or 5 times the benefit without spending any money. So just as an introspection, it's good if we have been leading a life, and if we have recently begun to practice meditation, then that's something to think about. The other topic relating to money is insurance, and this is particularly North America and maybe the Western countries. A big expense, right? We pay insurance for our homes, we pay insurance, health insurance to start with. That's a big topic, huge topic. But then it also extends beyond that. So the fundamental need for insurance traces back to risk, as we all know. How much of risk are we willing to take in our lives? And at one end, an extreme could be that we are so scared, we are afraid, we fear that we're going to lose money. So we end up buying a lot of insurance, and the entire life is completely sealed up through huge insurance premiums, right? That is the one extreme. The other extreme, of course, is we do need insurance, and there might be people without any insurance at all. That is also not recommended. That's completely being erratic and reckless. So we need to find the right balance with the confidence that there is something that Sahaj and the whole meditation practice does to us, is that it provides a lot more security than we can think or we can imagine. We are protected if we have the right state and we are regularly meditating and all that. We can actually get a lot more protection and insurance from this whole all-pervading divine power. So when we sit for meditation and we say, okay, I surrender to this power, by all means, it is a very real thing, right? So it's the most powerful power in this universe, and it does begin to protect us in our lives, not just during our meditation, but throughout our day and throughout our time and our lifestyle. So we do get that extra protection for sure. And so we don't need to spend as much money on trying to get and purchase insurance for many of these small things. Just the big ones that make that, common sense tells us we need to have insurance, we can focus on, and try not to spend or waste money trying to insure so many different things, like the carpet that we have, or some exquisite object and so on. Or we don't need to worry, for example, if you're going on a trip or something, that something untoward will happen, and so we purchase travel insurance and so on. So life actually begins to become boring, and in addition to spending the money. So from a financial standpoint, we might well rethink the extent of insurance that we need. At the same time, the caveat being that we need to use our common sense, and we need to buy the big ticket items. We should not compromise on, say, health insurance and so on. Because we have seen people who have said, okay, now I'm doing my meditations, I'll keep my chakras clean, I will never fall sick, so I don't buy health insurance. No, that's absolutely a wrong thing to do. That would be the other extreme. We shouldn't do that. All right, moving on. The other recommendations, changing shopping habits, I think is a good thing. And it's in some ways is related to the earlier point I'd said about inference. About insurance. And the point is that we need to analyze and introspect why we buy things, right? In the last session, I said, when we buy things, try to keep them as natural as possible so that the vibrations are good. And try to look for value for money and all of that. But this is about shopping habits, which is more on ourselves or our family. The general tendency might be that when we have the money, to go ahead and buy in excess, right? And also buy before supplies, are exhausted. And so we get into that habit, we keep on spending money, whether it is grocery shopping or something for clothes or something about convenience. It's almost like we cannot withstand a moment of discomfort, right? We have to be comfortable, and we have to sort of even pamper ourselves, and we have to quickly buy. Now, conventional wisdom obviously says, okay, that's good. If you need something, go ahead and do it and all that, right? Now, from a spiritual standpoint, actually some level of discomfort is good because it can teach us many valuable lessons. What will happen, for example, if say we like something, let's say we love bread, right? And you run out of bread. What happens if you don't buy another loaf of bread before the current loaf runs out, what happens? What will happen if we live without bread for 2 days, right? What's that experience like? That is a valuable experience, to be without something and test ourselves and to see what our reactions are. Is a great way to introspect the level, so at so many levels, right? One is, are we really upset? Do we really feel that something big has been removed from our lives if we stop eating bread for 2 days? And the other thing is to see how much attached are we? Can we really do without it, right? And the third thing, even better, can we actually look for a substitute that's readily available, which we have been ignoring, which might actually give us some better experience in some way? There are so many options, possibilities that exist. So the point here is that instead of trying to spend money to rack up everything and stock our shelves and be completely comfortable and everything, we should allow for a little bit of you could say disorder, in a mild way. Of course, we don't want to go to the other extreme and go hungry or anything like that, and we don't want to do it with our children. But in general, it might be a good idea to revisit shopping habits and say, okay, I've run out of this thing, let me see if I can actually manage. And in fact, even for children, it might be good. Maybe we are pampering children in this generation by giving them almost everything that we need. What happens? What is their reaction? How is their character when they learn to live without something, right? When they really feel that they need something but they can't get it, right? It's good for their ego as well. So that balance is good, and it's worth trying out. And if you add it up over many things that we have, you might actually save some money, or you may not spend as much, right? So that's worthwhile thinking about. So that's what this recommendation is about. Try shopping when you really need something, and after you have felt the need, not before. Not before you run out of that, and then you begin to anticipate that you're going to need. See how it feels. The other attached recommendation, or the connected recommendation, is that, especially on food, we spend a lot of money, is that we should not waste food, especially in perishables. We should not buy and then throw it, because food also is an extremely precious and scarce resource. We need to study the lives of people who die of hunger, and so many children who go hungry. So it's an absolutely bad thing to waste food, for one thing, and on top of that, to be spending money buying something and then throwing it away. So we should be careful. At the other end, we also need to be careful about the other most important piece of advice, which is not abusing Mother Earth. So if we buy a lot of things that we don't use and we throw it away, we are not only just wasting our money and wasting the food, but we are also, in a way, putting more unnecessary pressure on Mother Earth to absorb all our things that we throw away. So in every way we look at it, that's not a good thing to do. Next, moving on, the whole point about what is our standard of living. Now, there is a fundamental change, a very important change that happens when we get our self-realization, we pursue the spiritual path, is that if we examine our standard of living, it is probably related or relative to either our neighbors, or in our social circles, or maybe with people who we work, our colleagues, and so on. So in some ways, what the kind of lifestyle we have, the kind of homes we have, the cars that we have, clothes we wear, and everything may have been relative to our societal standards, or even sometimes for prestige or privilege. Now, when we get into meditation and in spirituality, all that should completely go away. We should re-establish the whole standard for ourselves, being spiritual people. It's not necessary. We don't have to look good in the eyes of people who have not gotten their self-realization, right? So we need to live to our standards. And so from a money standpoint, if we are spending money on something just to look good to people who effectively do not matter to us, then we might want to change our spending habits. And then the associated point is that the life also needs to change. Our spending and living for what we spend, either clothes and homes and cars and comforts and everything, has to be in line with our new standard of living, which is essentially our dharma, or the code of conduct, and a spiritual life. And again, this does not mean that we have to just give up everything and lead a life of minimalism. Absolutely not. All it means is we should introspect and see if we have been spending money, which is not necessarily just for our spiritual growth and our own standards, but in the eyes of others, maybe friends, relatives, or whatever. And therefore, see if you can be more wise with our money. All right. Now the conclusions finally is that overall from the last 2 weeks and last session and this session from money and finances, some of the core principles and conclusions. One is that we should be dominating money. In fact, anything, our attention should have complete control. Nothing should actually worry us or take our attention away. And that's most importantly about money as well. Even a problem with money, the lack of money or having problems with finances tends to interfere with our attention. So we should try to rise above the state where we have complete control over the situation, regardless of whether we have money or not, right? So that's the state that we want to get to. And then always keeping in mind that we get what we need and what we deserve. We may not always get what we want. That's an important thing. We probably need to have those two buckets clearly. What is a need versus what is a want? And if there is a want, this is not to say that we should not want anything and completely become desireless and all that. That's only for extremely evolved people. If we can do that, that's fine, but that's not really necessary. But it's important to introspect on what we want and see if there is a way that we probably don't have to spend money for those wants. The surrendered state is the best for solving all money problems. So this is a thing completely against conventional wisdom. Your financial consultant would say, oh, you have a problem, you are in debt, do this. Yes, you have to take some real world actions. But before that, we have to surrender to this higher state and this power and work on our Nabi chakra, work on our contentment and that whole principle of wealth, along with taking other measures. So without that, we will just solve one problem and the problem will just come back. So that's a spiritual solution for money problems. It's important to understand also, we have spoken so much about money and finances. What is true wealth that is much better than money? There are a few things in life which are treasures, which must be treasured by us, extremely important. One is our spiritual health and spiritual wealth. Spiritual wealth comes from developing a great state of our chakras, of our whole spiritual subtler being, and it becoming powerful. That is really true wealth because we can do so many things with it and things automatically happens for us. So that's the wealth we want to pursue, right? As opposed to material wealth. And spiritual health, of course, is keeping our chakras in the right order. So all this is much better than chasing money and trying to acquire wealth. So that's the real wealth. The other one that's often spoken about, even by our founder and in many, many situations, is that we should protect our innocence. In fact, there is also, in one of the conversations, one of the talks, where she has said that human beings will not put their gold on the streets, but they will just squander their innocence. In other words, our innocence and chastity, the whole Mooladhara chakra, is so much important and so much fundamental to our spirituality that should be protected like we would protect our gold or vault, put it in a vault or whatever, right? That's how we should be looking at innocence as an extremely precious commodity that we should be focusing on protecting and guarding and growing. So that's in real terms, that wealth is so much of higher grade than the real money and material wealth. The other thing is the whole seeking of higher purpose, trying to be spiritual itself has immense benefits in the long term, and it cannot be equated to the material comforts. But the problem is to get to that point and begin to see the benefits, we need to work and focus on that. We need to understand that it is a form of wealth by itself. And people talk about blessings that they have, and we get those blessings only when we actually work towards them. It's not just all luck. So the pursuit of higher purpose is also a tremendous form of long-term wealth that we should be focusing on. And then the other benefit of spiritual wealth is to be able to have the power to change the world. And it gives so much happiness and so much satisfaction when we change people's lives positively. That cannot be equated to the how much ever wealth we might have, right? So that whole power to change the world can come from that spiritual state and developing that. So those are some of the important things that constitute real wealth that we should focus on as people who are spiritual. Moving on, a few more things. The most important one, there was a question last week as well. So how do we come down to it? What does it come down to, right? How do we solve our financial troubles? That's what this whole session is about. So there are a few recommendations for that. We have already discussed working on our spiritual state, highest priority. Second is work on our Nabi chakra to establish our powers. Now, suppose that we are having issues with even basic needs. We shouldn't, typically we will not, once you start your meditation, you will not have problem for food, clothing, shelter. But the Nabi chakra is a basis for that. And how do we improve our Nabi chakra? I think that there are tactical solutions, like there are methods by which we can clear our Nabi chakra and all that. But those are, I would say, short-term, and they are more tactical. They may not help us sustain this whole power. Yes, we can do clearing of our chakras. We can do our foot soaking. We can do our regular meditation and all of that. But beyond that, there isn't a magical solution to improve the Nabi chakra. It is a deeper pursuit. So for instance, we have to introspect on our generosity, right? How much are we spending on ourselves versus how much are we spending money? How much is that generosity for accommodating people, becoming better hosts, trying to take care of people and all of that, right? Is that whole instinct within us? And so can we change over there? Can we improve ourselves? Those are things which will, the sense of caring for others, the sense of generosity, in small ways will add up and begin to make a difference in our Nabi chakra. And then on the other side is the contentment. Are we happy with what we have? Or even if we are not, can we make an attempt to be happy, right? And just move past that and still live with that. So that whole contentment aspect, the caring aspect, nurturing aspect, all of these need to be worked on in the longer term to bring about an improvement in the Nabi chakra, in addition to all of this meditation, clearing and all that. So that's essential. The other thing that might help clear up our Nabi is if you have too many things around us and our lives are complicated, then you may want to revisit that and relook at all the material possessions. Maybe get rid of many things. Just give them away. If they are good things and others will benefit, maybe just give them away and see. It's a double benefit. You work on your generosity and you have fewer things to worry on, right? You're putting less pressure on your Nabi chakra. So this optimal level of material possessions might be something to look at. We can always do it. There is always room for getting better and cleaning up things. So that's another strategy. And then the whole part about pursuing money, earning money, and trying to invest and save and all of that. I think it's an optional activity. And as we have already discussed, it's okay to do that. There's nothing wrong with it. And especially if the money is put to good use and for good causes, then that's a good thing. But the other thing also is, if we do manage to save a lot of money and we have money, the real question is, can we actually part with our money, or are we still attached? Can we give it away for a good cause? That is a test that we will all face, right? And in a way, it is good in that sense to have the money and to have the feeling that, yes, I can give it away provided the right cause is there, right? But if you are accumulating money and then you find that you are finding it difficult to part with it, then maybe you have to work on your Nabi chakra. The contentment levels is not good enough, right? So that's another way to improve the generosity aspect and working on that. Now, trying to get out of debt, highly recommended. We don't have to panic and we don't have to take any drastic measures. But in general, it's always recommended that we have as less of debt as possible. So it will help our Nabi chakra and the whole principle of wealth. Get rid of the attitude to buy more things. Instead, if we buy things to create joy and vibrations, maybe as gifts to others, that's another way the Nabi will again improve. And we can even do this. You can test this out for a good cause and to help somebody. Even when you are struggling for money, if you do manage to do this, you will find that the divine will respond, right? You will find that the money will come back to you and your problem will get solved. It is almost magical the way it works. And I have tested and tried this out so many times. It just works like magic. So in other words, our state also improves. On one hand, we have financial troubles and some problem. On the other hand, there is somebody who needs it even more, right? And is really struggling, right? If we are able to, in that situation, part with our money and help that person, we will find that our problems are also getting solved somehow. So that whole principle of flow of wealth sets into action. Yes, we are giving the money away even when we have a problem, but it will eventually come back around back to us. You can test that out a few times. It will actually work. And I, for one, have experienced that that really works. Then the other thing in today's world is if you're always under pressure for money, then maybe we need to review your lifestyle and priorities and the standards. We spoke about the standards to which we must subject ourselves. So that's a good idea. It'll release the pressure, solve the financial troubles, because if you reconfigure your life to setting your own standards based on a spiritual life, then you'll probably spend less money. The other one I wanted to also cover is, there is this tendency, right? Attend a spa kind of a situation and pamper yourself. So even with Sahaj, right? If you are trying to spend a whole lot of money, although I can't think of how you would spend that, but we have seen people attending seminars, traveling all over, trying to attend this Sahaj session, that Sahaj session, and spending the money to the point where the focus is more than just spirituality. And it is all about trying to get as many events and spending money on yourself. Then that isn't a good thing either, right? There is nothing that says that sitting at home, you cannot get a deep experience. Or these days, we even have online meditation. So without spending money, you might still be able to get the same experience and work on yourself. So in other words, spiritual growth itself should not be a source of spending too much money, right? And under the pretext that you are trying to improve yourself, so you need that money. And that typically might be equated to, I need this experience of going to a spa and treating myself so that, I've deserved it, so that it makes me better. No, that argument doesn't work, especially for Sahaj, right? So that balance is also important. And that's an important point. We have seen people who do that. So that's worth introspecting as well. And so that's essentially that. This is all about the conclusions and about the strategies for doing, for managing our money and finances. I think we have covered quite a few topics. If you have any questions, you can always come back to me. Then now we will just get into the meditation one more time. We still have 5 minutes left. So let's go and do one more round of meditation. So let's close our eyes. This time, let's watch our breathing in and out to stabilize our attention. And watching our breathing can take us into that higher state of thoughtless awareness. Now let's take our attention to the Sahasrara. Once again, surrender, accept and let all things go, all the problems, just surrender them to this great divine power. Now we can slowly open our eyes and raise our Kundalini energy to conclude the meditation. So that brings us to the end of today's session, and we will continue again next week with a new topic and a different one. Thanks for taking the time. As always, if you have any questions, you can always come back to me over email. Thank you.